Well, good morning. Welcome to the Breakfast Club. Welcome back. I hope you guys had a wonderful 3-day holiday weekend, and it's good to be here with you all. Today is May 26th, and as you know, it's a good day to have a good day. All right, so I wanted to talk a little bit about something that I call Freedom Memorial Day and the future of ownership. That was the topic of conversation today. Obviously, we just had a wonderful 3-day holiday, and freedom is one of those things that people rarely appreciate until they start losing it. You ever notice that? Most people look at Memorial Day weekend as the unofficial start of summer. It's barbecues, it's family gatherings, it's pool parties, boats for a lot of people, maybe a long weekend away from work. And honestly, there's nothing wrong with any of that. We should enjoy life and spend time with the people that we love. But when you really stop and think about Memorial Day, it's obviously about something so much bigger. It's obviously about remembering the men and women who sacrificed their lives protecting our freedoms. And not just freedom in theory, but I'm talking about real freedom. The freedom to build a business, to provide for your family, to own property, to speak your mind, to pursue opportunity and to create a better life. Almost every, if you think about it, every meaningful part of our daily lives is connected to freedom in some way. Yet most people don't necessarily notice freedom disappearing when it happens slowly. And history has shown us over and over again that freedoms are rarely lost overnight. Usually it happens little by little through dependency or maybe manipulation or censorship or corruption or excessive control or systems that become too centralized and too powerful over time. And that's one of the reasons blockchain technology has become such an important global conversation. Because at its core, blockchain is not really about speculation or chasing these random meme coins. The bigger conversation is about ownership. It is about transparency. It's about accountability. It's about decentralization and it's about participation. And those are all obviously big words. And so, imagine if one company controlled the entire internet for a moment. Or imagine if one bank controlled every single transaction. Imagine if a handful of entities had the power to freeze your money, or to manipulate records, or to limit the access, or to decide who gets opportunity and who doesn't, or who gets funding or who doesn't. Most people would probably agree that that becomes dangerous pretty quickly. Would you agree? That scenario becomes more and more dangerous. The reason that decentralized systems matter is because they distribute power across networks instead of concentrating it into the hands of a few people. That creates more transparency. And it also creates more accountability and even more participation, as you guys know. So instead of systems operating under the just trust us, now blockchain allows systems to become far more verifiable. And that's power when you really think about it. Over the last several years, people have also started waking up to how fragile many traditional systems actually are. Right? We've watched governments print trillions of dollars almost overnight. We watched inflation quietly destroy purchasing power. We watched banks fail. I don't know if you guys know, but in the last 6 years, more banks have failed than all of the years added up to that point in time. We watched inflation destroying the younger generation's ability to be able to purchase homes. We've watched centralized platforms censor people. We've watched ordinary people realize that when you don't control infrastructure, you are ultimately dependent on infrastructure. And that realization has changed a lot of people. Most people think that inflation simply means that prices went up. But inflation is really your money quietly losing purchasing power over time. It's one of the reasons so many people feel like they're working harder while somehow they're still falling behind financially. You know, if you think about our grandparents, your grandparents, they could often support a household on one income, most of them. Today, many families need two or even three incomes just to survive. Young people are delaying marriages or delaying children or delaying home ownership. And in some cases, they're completely losing faith in the traditional financial system altogether. I remember growing up believing that if you worked hard and you stayed disciplined and you saved money, um, played by the rules, you could create a pretty good life in America. And today, a lot of younger people don't necessarily have that same belief system. And honestly, that frustration is one of the reasons that, in my opinion, decentralized technologies continue gaining momentum around the world because people are searching for systems that create more transparency, that create more ownership, that create more accountability, and they create more opportunity. And this is also where the ownership conversation really becomes important because most wealthy families throughout history did not simply consume products, they owned pieces of the infrastructure. They owned real estate, they owned energy, they owned businesses, networks, distribution, technology, or think about assets that other people used every single day. And average people are usually taught to become consumers first and owners later, if ever. Most people spend their entire lives paying into systems that they will never own. They use platforms, they pay fees, they consume products, they build audiences for large corporations, and ultimately they make these centralized systems wealthier and more powerful. Very few people ever position themselves anywhere near the infrastructure layer itself. And history it's shown us something really important. The builders of infrastructure often benefit the most over time. So we talked about in the presentations, the railroads before expansion, the roads before the rush, the internet before mass adoption, cloud computing before AI exploded, or, all of these examples, they prove one thing, that infrastructure matters. And one thing that I've learned in this business is that history tends to reward the people who recognize where the world is heading before the rest of society fully catches on. And that doesn't mean that every, by the way, emerging technology succeeds. And it certainly doesn't mean that every blockchain project is legitimate because there are absolute scams in cryptocurrency. But there are also scams in real estate, there are scams in banking, there's scams in stocks and businesses too. There's that don't invalidate, bad actors don't invalidate transformational technology. So the internet had scams, social media had scams, email has scams, and technology itself truly is neutral because people determine how it gets used. So technology itself is neutral, but people determine how it gets used. And if we're being honest, almost every transformational technology in history in the beginning stages looked somewhat confusing. It looked risky, it looked unnecessary, or even stupid in the beginning. And so, you think about the internet or social media or streaming or AI, blockchain's no different. And I still remember when people laughed at the idea of buying products online because they thought nobody would ever trust entering a credit card into a computer. Does anybody remember that? Anybody never did not want to buy something online because you didn't want to put your credit card? You think about that. And today, billions of people buy products online every single day without even thinking about it. That's usually how innovation works. It's slow at first, it's quiet, and then suddenly all at once. And what matters is understanding the direction that the world is moving. Music became digital, communication became digital, movies became digital, business became digital. Now, ownership, assets, contracts, financial systems, real world assets, they're going digital. That's what this is all about. That shift is literally happening whether people fully understand it yet or not. And this is where blockchains become practical instead of theoretical. Imagine real estate ownership records living on blockchain rails, where ownership becomes instantly verifiable and dramatically harder to manipulate. Imagine tokenized assets trading globally with faster settlement, more transparency. The middlemen are out of the equation. Imagine ownership becoming fractionalized, allowing more people access to opportunities that historically only wealthy people had access to in the past. That's why tokenization has become such an important conversation globally. And I wanted to share this because I want you to understand what you're a part of. Many people don't realize they already participate in digital ecosystems every single day. Social media platforms monetize their attention. Banks monetize deposits. Streaming companies monetize these subscriptions. Large technology companies monetize this use behavior and data constantly. How many of you have said, I'd love to have chicken for dinner, and all of a sudden in your news feeds, all you see is KFC ads or whatever the case might be, or you mentioned something about shopping, and then next thing you know, everything that you were just talking about pops up into your news feeds on social media. The real question becomes whether ordinary people in the future will simply remain consumers inside digital ecosystems or whether they will begin participating in ownership of the infrastructure itself. And perhaps one of the most important ideas of all of this is this: decentralization gives ordinary people the ability to participate in infrastructure instead of simply consuming products from centralized systems for their entire lives. That is what you are sharing. That opportunity is what you are giving someone. It's to get out of the matrix and give them a chance to be able to participate on the ownership level. That's a very different model because this conversation is bigger than just cryptocurrency. It's really about the future of ownership itself. It's who owns the systems, who controls the infrastructure, who participates in the upside, and who benefits from the networks being built. And those questions are becoming more and more important. And I think one of the biggest mistakes that people make is assuming that opportunities disappear because people lack intelligence. Most of the time, opportunities are ignored because familiarity just feels safe. It feels safer than the uncertainty. And human nature tends to reject things that feel unfamiliar right up until the moment they become obvious to everybody else. So, in closing, and then I'd love to open this up and just hear you guys' thoughts and comments here, but Memorial Day reminds us that freedom has always required sacrifice. Freedom has always required sacrifice. Previous generations protected freedom physically. This generation may very well play a role in protecting parts of it digitally, financially, and technologically for future generations through innovation, through education, through transparency, and through decentralized infrastructure. That's why these conversations matter so much. That's why this platform matters so much. Because whether people realize it yet or not, the next era of finance, of ownership, of tokenization, and digital infrastructure is already being built, and each and every one of you guys is a part of it. So the only question is whether people will take the time to understand these shifts early while the roads are still being built, or will they wait until the roads are already crowded? And when you go share the trusted smart chain node opportunity with someone else, that is what you are giving them an opportunity to be able to be a part of. That is what you are inviting them to participate in. It's up to them to choose whether they get involved or not. It's not our job to push, to oversell, to overhype, or condense. It's to open up doors to new opportunities to be able to be free.
Not making promises, but Tranquil is back in for final qualification this week. Grow Estate right behind it. Adapti should be filing next week. Nomics is almost done with their audit. The new project Deed Flow just got their website and their I think Map formed the LLC this week. So there's a lot of stuff moving on the RWA side. So obviously we'll let's talk about the Acme rockets, okay? So let's say Acme's been selling rockets for years, right? But now they want to tokenize. Okay, sorry, I'm driving. And they don't want to. Basically, in order to pass an audit and start their Reg A, the auditors would probably take months and months and months for auditing a business with lots of transactions for 3 years. Well, let's say that the idea of what we were actually tokenizing was a royalty off of each rocket. Okay, that's what they were going to pay back to the investors. That's what we were tokenizing as a new revenue source. Okay, let's say it was $3 a rocket or whatever, right? So what the team would do is create a new entity, create it what's called an SPV, or in a special purpose vehicle. They would take the Acme Rocket royalty out of current Acme Rockets, put it into the new entity. Let's call it, whatever. I don't know, whatever. Acme tokenized RWA, and open a new business, a new LLC or a new C corp, depending upon the way they wanted to structure. Okay, open up a new bank account, start the new website, right, for the new entity, which now carries the royalty back to those investors. And on the new bank account, they'd put whatever, 150, $100,000 as an initial company deposit into that bank account, so the company has some capital, and then that new entity would be the subject of the audit. And because you're looking at potentially a month or two of bank statements with nothing but one deposit, the audit costs you $7,500 instead of $25,000, and takes 2 or 3 weeks versus 2 or 3 months. So a lot of the assets that you guys are going to see are, yes, they are new entities, but they're new entities with either a royalty structure or some sort of dividend or participation or ownership in the real estate, due to it's a lot easier to file a Reg A and do your GAAP audit, I think, or PCOAB audit, when you only have 2 months of an entity and 2 months of bank statements versus going back years and years and years, like, for instance, with Adapti, right? Nomics is doing the same thing right now. Nomics has been in existence for a handful of years, so their audit is a lot more difficult because they're not a new entity than, say, Tranquil was, right? Where they took two of the facilities that they already owned, rolled them into a new entity, started a new company name, started a new LLC, got a new bank account, and that audit went very, very quickly. So yeah, understanding structure, right, is a key piece to answering those difficult questions. But hopefully that helps you guys understand a little bit, to say, listen, the businesses aren't new, but sometimes the royalty stream or the tokenization aspect of what these businesses are tokenizing, part of their company or part of their royalty or part of their equity, etc. These are new entities, and that's to keep the audits a lot easier, a lot cleaner, and a lot cheaper.